Here in London's White City tonight, there is a challenge to the British heavyweight boxing title. Jack Doyle from Era.
We are here on the holy ground in picturesque Cobh, a town in East Cork, formerly known as Queenstown, the birthplace of a man who had the looks of a Greek god, but the morals of an alley cat. On his downfall, he said it was due to fast women and slow horses. However, the story before that is almost beyond belief. Born in this building was a gentleman called Joseph Alphonsus Doyle. The name Doyle comes from the Norse. People with the name Doyle are descended from the Norse. It means dark stranger or devoil. Jack Doyle was a man of 6'5", about 1.95 meters. So like those Vikings that would have raided our shores, Jack Doyle was large, he was ferocious, and he fought with a temper.
Colin, can you tell me about the time that Jack asked you to pose as a journalist?
Yes, I was drinking with Jack in a pub in London called The Hoop. There was a lot of Irish youths there, and Bing Crosby was in London at the time. So Jack said to me, look, Colin, he called the manager of the bar and he gave me about 4 or 5 pens. He put the pens in there. Then he got a briefcase, he gave it to me. And I said, what are you doing, Jack? I'll tell you now, he says. So he said, Bing Crosby is in London and I'm getting 5,000 to meet him. But I need to get 2,000 now, so I'm taking you up to the manager of the hotel. I'm going to introduce you as a reporter of the Daily Mail. And I said, Jesus, yeah, but if I have to put on an English accent, Jack, what'll I? You'll be all right, son, he says. So he went in, I'm outside, and he came out and he called me and he said to the manager, he says, this is my friend, he's an editor with the Daily Mail. Oh, I'm pleased to meet you, I'm sure. I said this and that. And I got away, but Jack went back in and he came out of the office and he winked at me as much as say he scored. He got the few thousand off your man. And that was the first experience I had with Jack in that line.
You actually stayed with Jack Doyle for a period of time?
I did, and how that came about was I hadn't met Jack at this stage, but I asked an old friend of his from Cobh, County Cork, called Jerry Griffin. His nickname was Sharky because he was a big man. So I asked Sharky and he told me where I'd find Jack. So I went in with my case into the Hoop in Notting Hill Gate. And I asked the barman, as I told you before, for a pint. And then I asked him about Jack Doyle, and I sent it. So, to make a long story short, anyhow, Jack asked me where was I staying. Well, I said, Jack, I haven't booked in anywhere yet, but I'm going to look for... Well, he says, you're staying with me. I won't have any townie of mine going back and saying that Jack Doyle didn't take care of him. And I stayed with Jack for 3 months. And every morning we'd walk down London and he'd get 2 carnations from the flower lady, one for me and one for himself. And he'd introduced me, he said to the flower lady, this is my son by Movita. And of course I felt that big, and we'd go down to the Hoop, and that's the way it was.
At one point in time, Colin, there was a plan to set up a memorial for Jack Doyle in Cobh.
Yeah.
There was a committee. Have you any new developments on that memorial?
No, there's no developments, but I would like to organise. I think he should be worthy of a statue in his hometown. for such a famous man, and I'm going to look into it.
Can you tell me, I believe your family was involved in the repatriation of Jack Doyle's remains back to Ireland. Can you tell me a little about that?
They were, yes. Well, I was in Australia then, and my late brother Peter Barry, which had a family business there, phoned me that Jack had dropped dead in London and that he was going to go over to bring him back. Now, he was aware that Jack financially wasn't that good, but he was willing to forfeit that because he was one of our own and we'll bring him back. And he went over, brought him back via Dublin, and as I say, I wasn't there, but I believe the funeral was the biggest funeral through Cork City since Terence McSweeney. And the Cork Boxing Association gave it a guard of honour, and the same here in Cobh. And then my brother, when Jack was laid to rest, my brother actually picked the headstone in the old church cemetery, and that's where poor Jack lays now. So. Now I might tell you this before I finish. There was a rumour going around that Jack was sleeping rough and that he was beat his women up. And I knew the last woman he had, her name was Nancy Cobh. She was from Clare. And I said to Nancy, how does Jack treat you? He never laid a hand on me, Colin. His only one fault was if dinner was ready, I'd phone him and he'd be having a few pints and he wouldn't arrive back until 2 hours, so that I was used to that. But other than that, he never touched me. And he said he was a wonderful man and I miss him, and she cried. So,
In that interview, Colin Barry referenced allegations of intimate partner violence by Doyle. In general, there are very few negative memories reported by many of the hundreds of women he was involved with. However, his second spouse, Movita Castaneda, alleges shocking mistreatment. While sober, he was charming and generous, but a dark side could emerge while he was drunk. During a period of severe mental anguish and chronic alcohol abuse in the early 1940s, it was said Doyle was at times almost completely out of control. Here on the holy ground, we have the last remnants of a business that existed in Jack Doyle's time. Apparently, he loved Chester cake, or in Cork it often gets called donkey's gudge or donkey's wedding cake, and he'd buy 6 or 7 of them at a time and scoff them down. And though Jack Doyle, when he was a young lad of 10 or 12, was almost 5'11" and probably about 11 stone, it didn't stop Mr. Carr giving him a clip around the ear now and again when he wasn't forthcoming with payment. So we have moved from the holy ground to this magnificent mural just beneath Cobh's beautiful cathedral. This mural was painted by the Cobh artist Jack Hickey, and it's one of the main monuments here in the town to commemorate the gorgeous Gael. Jack Doyle made his name fighting on the streets of Cobh in bare-knuckle fights. At the age of 16, he ran away to join the British Army. The Irish Guards lied about his age, changed his name to Jack Doyle, and the rest becomes history. He was a magnificent fighter, and he was bought out of the British Army by professional promoters who very soon put his name on the map. With 10 straight victories, Jack Doyle was becoming the stuff of legend and eventually got a crack at the British heavyweight title.
Doyle's early British Army amateur record was very impressive and soon led to a professional contract. A promoter, seeing his potential, bought him out of the army for £28. On turning professional between the 4th of April 1932 and the 18th of May 1933, Jack Doyle won his first 10 fights, all inside of 2 rounds, making him a contender for the British heavyweight title. If he had won that bout, the world would have been his oyster. On the 7th of December, watched by over 70,000 fans in London's White City Olympic Stadium, the 19-year-old gorgeous Gael fought Welshman Jack Peterson in his shot at the title. Alas, it was not meant to be. Doyle, inebriated, unhealthy and underprepared, lost by disqualification in the second round for throwing repeated foul punches. His purse of $3,000 was withheld by the British boxing authorities, leading to a lengthy legal dispute. In his comeback fight, Doyle beat Frank Barrington at the Royal Albert Hall in 83 seconds, but due to an ongoing dispute with the British Boxing Board of Control, he set sail for the US, where he won his first 3 fights in quick succession, but then lost heavily to Buddy Bear at Madison Square Gardens. In 1937, he resumed his UK boxing career with mixed results. In 1939, in front of 250,000 fans at White City, Jack Doyle faced a rematch against Eddie Phillips, who had beaten him the previous year in farcical circumstances. However, again he lost to Phillips, and this was a really devastating blow to his fight career. Some years later, in 1943, his final 2 fights were in Dublin's Delamount Park. In the first, for the Irish heavyweight title, he lost to Chris Cole, but some weeks later, in his last boxing match ever, Doyle beat fellow Corkman Dennis Butcher Howell. However, Jack's day had passed. In 1950, Jack turned to wrestling, and with great fanfare he pursued his new career. However, by late 1953, it had all fizzled out, as the sport did not have the commercial clout or press appeal of pro boxing. His early purses were over £900, but these later dwindled to as little as £25. He had squandered and gambled fortunes. In 1953, Jack Doyle declared bankruptcy, owing a huge tax bill. He decided it was not worth his while to continue with his participation in sports or the arts.
We are here in JFK Memorial Park, the prom, or the promenade, as the locals here call it. There is another tribute to Jack Doyle, right across from the Commodore Hotel, where he would catch up with friends on one of his many visits home. The owners, the O'Sheas, were instrumental in providing the assistance that helped to bring Jack's remains home from the UK after he had passed and fallen on hard times. We heard from Colin Barry about the time he met Jack Doyle, and Pat went through Jack's various fights. Now we're going to concentrate more on Jack Doyle's artistic side, because Jack was a dichotomy. As a fighter, he was like a barbarian, but was a very sensitive side to him. And here with me is John Smith, chairman of the East Cork Cinema Club, and also a bit of a DJ, music connoisseur. So no better man here in Cobh to talk about Jack Doyle with than John Smith. John, good to meet you.
Thanks, Ben.
So he made a few films, John?
He did. I think there was 2 full films, but then he had bit parts in other films. But he certainly made his mark in Hollywood for many different reasons.
What I noticed he learned was how to speak in this clipped English type accent of the time. Do you know the black and white movies were? So he took elocution lessons, and that stood to him for the rest of his life, because he spoke very eloquently and elegantly.
He had very good diction.
He certainly didn't have a Cobh accent anyway, John.
No, he didn't.
So, of course, in Hollywood, he did make a film with the woman he married, Judith Allen. Yes. Judith was a very successful actress, and Jack was trying to get his fight career going in the States, as you're probably well aware. Yeah. And I think the reason he's not his music career, you can test me that in a minute, his film career didn't take off is the fight guys felt they owned him. And the film guys didn't want to sign a guy attaching to boxing, which had a lot of kind of shady characters around it. So he was offered very good scripts because of his celebrity. Because Jack Doyle was one of the best known men in the world at this stage.
He was.
I mean, you made a great point. Was it George Best you said he was?
I kind of compare him to sort of a George Best kind of figure, where he had it all but had no guidance. Yeah. You know, it just all went to pot, so to speak. So, which is a shame, because I mean, there's an awful lot talked about Jack Doyle, but if we really sort of dig down, there's a lot more to the man.
Yeah, I mean, he was a jack of all trades.
Yes.
He was a magnificent fighter. Maybe not a magnificent boxer, but a magnificent fighter. He was an outstanding singer. He could act, and he stage shows, packed out Ireland and Britain
Yes.
regularly. And he lived like a multi-millionaire.
He did.
So I suppose he's one of the most successful people that never achieved a great
No.
deal. You know, he was
No.
never a champion boxer, but he was the biggest gate. You get more money for Jack Doyle fight than
Yes.
any other guy on the planet.
His
at the time.
flame sort of was so bright, but it kind of burnt out very quickly. You know.
Yeah.
But
Of course, the singing thing, Cobh is a great place for people singing and all that.
it is. Speaking about music, when Jack Doyle met his hero, the great fighter Jack Dempsey, he said, "I want to fight like you and sing like John McCormack." Jack Dempsey replied, "Wouldn't it be just too bad if you could sing like me and fight like John McCormack?" I remember my mum one time was telling me, well, she keeps recounting this story about with Movita. He was in partnership with Movita, who later went on to marry Marlon Brando, of course. But they were touring together, and they actually sang down in the Ormond Cinema in Cobh. And my mother recounts the story. She was in the audience, but before they came out on stage, he could hear them screaming and roaring at each other from behind the curtain. But you know, it was a kind of a love-hate relationship, I guess. But I suppose many of the relationships that Jack had were probably like that. It's kind of story of his life, really. He kind of, everything he put his hand to, he was great at.
Yeah,
but then it kind of,
I mean, looking at it would appear things were going pretty well. Judith Allen was mad about him, but that relationship floundered because of his womanizing and things like that. And then he made a play for the heiress of the Dodge Empire, Delphine Dodge, and that was a play for money. And I thought
Yes.
that was a change in his life.
yes,
And then that ended badly, we'll say, and his fight in the United States that should have set him up for a title crack went very badly as well. He lost the fight, and you know, so his movie career had stalled. And then, of course, when he was down in his luck, he had the good fortune to meet Movita, an American actress of note, who had been in Mutiny in the Bounty with Clark Gable.
Yes.
Of course, great story is Jack decided he would steal, was it Carol Lombard?
Carol Lombard, yeah.
Karen Lombard from Clark, just because he was a drinking pal of Clark,
Yes.
and he did it because he could.
Yes.
And poor Clark decided to talk to Jack about it, and as Jack said, two of us went out for the talk and one of us came back.
But you're mentioning superstars there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the circles he moved in, you know. So I mean, when you think about, I mean, who else is you could slip off the tongue?
Well,
Clark
he
Gable,
hung up,
Caroline, you know.
the Prince of Wales was a fan.
Yes. Yeah.
There was Lord Milton in Dublin, who he used to go drinking with. So he caroused with the hoi polloi.
Yes,
It was a
indeed.
long way from the docks in Cobh.
Indeed
But
it
with
was.
his well-spoken accent, and he was sensitive. He could repeat Rudyard Kipling's "if" word by word. So he had the soul of an artist. There's no
Yes.
doubt about it. And not everyone can sing. You have to be able to put a song across. Was it South of the Border he done with?
South of the Border, yeah. I think it was partially penned by Jimmy Kennedy, another Irishman.
So have you ever heard Jack singing?
Yes, actually.
Tell us about that.
Well, my
This is more
grandfather.
than on a record now.
No, this is live. Yeah, this is in a pub. My grandfather, Jerry Griffin, or Sharky Griffin, would be known to many people as Sharky. He went to school with Jack. So you must remember these two guys were born pre-First World War. So 1913, 1914. Men of their time. Two huge men, 6'6", 20 stone, just whole coat. They just had a presence. But my mum used to tell me, well, Jack Doyle's in town, because he used to come home in the 60s and 70s. And of course, I would be the first grandson of Sharky, and I would come down into this very spot that we're sitting now, where I'm actually sitting now.
This is Sharky.
Sharky would sit here, Jack Doyle would sit there, and in the far corner you probably have Danny Jordan. All dockers and characters. In fact, they used to have a plate, I think, inscribed Danny Jordan's seat, Sharky's seat, or whatever.
So what year would this have been roughly, John?
This would have been the early to mid 70s.
72 onwards.
Yeah, 72. So I would have been about 10 or 11. And so when my mum used to tell me that Jack was in town, I'd run down here, just to see Jack, but I mean, this towering, two
Well,
men who were
you
towering.
had Sharky at 6'6",
And I think
Jack
Jack
at
was-
6'5", and
Yeah.
was the other gentleman?
No, he was probably 6'5" this way. But anyway, but if there are any relations of Danny, sorry about that. But you know, Danny was a character, and they all worked in the docks and the tenders and the liners. But yeah, I used to come down because I knew Jack would give me a couple of bob. So I used to come in, and he used to give me a shilling or 2 shillings, old money back then, and used to hold court or whatever. But I do remember, it was many years, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years, every year I'd come down and see him. But my grandfather used to take me to the Cork Harbour matches, the great Cork Harbour Hibs team in the 70s. And I remember one occasion we came with Mr. Burke, I think he owned a pub. He had a car, one of the few people who had cars, and we drove back to Cunningham's or Handlebars pub, which is just outside the railway station.
Yes.
I'm not sure what it is now, but we would walk. They would send me in first, and I always remember there was guys playing darts and rings. It was the first time I saw guys playing rings, and my grandfather and Jack would walk in, and you could just everything stopped. They just had this presence, and Handlebars, as I used to call him, the big Handlebars moustache, used to call him. I think there's a photograph actually of Jack behind the bar with my grandfather. But anyway, after a few drinks, they would start to sing song, and it was just magical. Now, I mean, I was very young, and I thought, you know, it was great, but I didn't think it was unique.
You were playing rings with a recording superstar, Hollywood fame.
Yes.
The probably most successful untitled boxer in the world,
Quite possibly,
250,000 at White City. They
Yes.
only returned the box office that night at 40,000, believe it or not. So Jack was ripped off in every way. There's loads of stories about gangsters being involved, him being duped and throwing fights. There's all that ruined his career. And he only ever wanted to start out to be like Jack Dempsey. But Sharky stayed. Like Jack
Sharky
went
stayed.
and took on the world. But
Yes.
Sharky's kind of more than just a big man. He was a big man in the town. He was
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody.
the fabric
knew
of the
Sharky.
town, a character.
Yes, and they were men of their time. I mean, people. My mother used to call him a great maker-outer. So you know, during the war, I mean, my grandfather was on the D-Day landings. He joined the British Army, and people had to make choices back then. So we have a great photograph actually of Sharky with. As you know, the commander-in-chief of the D-Day landings was General Eisenhower.
So you're only one step removed, not from only Jack Doyle, from Eisenhower.
Well, I move in great circles, man. But
Right, Jack.
anyway, no. But many years later, my grandfather was working on the tenders, and there was a photo op because President Eisenhower, or he had been president, was on the ship, and there's a photo of my grandfather shaking hands with President Eisenhower, who was his commander-in-chief in 1944 in the D-Day landing. So that's on our mantelpiece, and it takes pride of place. But these were larger than life men. I mean, they
So
were
no matter
men of the time.
what stage Jack was in his life, he always came back to Cobh.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
sometimes he was rich, sometimes he wasn't so rich, but he always gave the impression of being rich, I presume.
Yes, he always looked dapper. He had a carnation every time. He looked very different to everybody else. I mean, my grandfather would have had a white Aran jumper or cardigan. That was kind of his trademark sort of garb. But Jack, when you walked in, you just see this dapper guy, carnation, big man, and, you know, could hold court. And, you know, you can see why women just fell at his feet. I mean, you know, everything that he did was just, you know, big news.
Yeah, he was big news all around the world. Finally, John, did you attend Jack's funeral here in Cobh?
Yes.
Can you remember anything of it?
It was just a huge funeral. That's I don't know what age I was a teenager, but it was just amazing. And I think it was the boxing club that actually funded an awful lot of the money to bring Jack back to his home, and rightly so. This is where he now resides, so to speak. But he used to reside here in this very stool, or with my grandfather. So it's pretty
Indeed.
cool that
Well,
we can do this now.
Let's have a little cheers there to Sharky, Jack, and the other guy, Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Jordan, Danny.
Danny Jordan,
Cheers,
Sharky
guys.
Griffin, Jack Doyle, the gorgeous Gale. Your health.
Thoughts, yeah.
When Irish hearts are happy, all the while seems bright and gay. But when I